Hello folks, welcome back to Learn Synthesis with Ableton Live. I'm Dr. Lawrence W. Moore of the Wayfarer project. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the instrument in Ableton that's called Analog. It's a pretty cool little synthesizer, pretty powerful. It's got a number of routing options and stuff like that. In this episode, we're basically going to be looking at the lay of the land, like the graphic user interface, the different controls, how you can do different routings, and basically how the synthesizer overall works. In the next episode, we'll be going over some sound types and creating some common synthesis sounds using analog. So it'll be basically a two-parter here. If you haven't seen any other episodes in this series, you might want to check out episodes 1 through 4, especially if I start talking about some things in this episode that you don't quite understand, because that will be prerequisite knowledge if you're new to synthesis or new to Ableton Live, something like that. But I'll leave that up to your own judgment. Just want to let you know that they're out there. Okay, folks, so let's get on with it. Okay, so I have here the instrument in question, analog. As with a lot of the Ableton instruments, it basically has a central view area, and that view will adapt to the sections that you click on. Like this is an oscillator 1, this is filter 1, amplitude envelope 1, and the LFO section, as well as what we could call basically our master output. And basically signal in this instrument flows from left to right, and we have 3 different areas and 2 sets of them. We have basically our oscillator section, oscillator 1 and 2, above and below. We have filter 1 and filter 2, above and below, and amplitude 1 and amplitude 2. And then basically signal flows left to right through these according to the routings that you set. We'll be looking at the different routings in a moment, and end up here where the LFO can then be assigned to various areas of the synthesizer. Well, there are actually 2 LFOs, in fact. And then here is basically like your master output with volume and some other goodies that we'll be taking a look at too. So let's talk about the routings, because that's at the heart of the matter. And this diagram here helps. In order to get this view screen, just click on the rightmost section, what I'm calling the master section there, master out. It basically gives you your global settings. Incidentally, do have global checked unless you have a controller that is MIDI polyphonic expression or MPE. Then you can check this off if you have such a controller and work with that. I do not at this time, so I'll be basically using a standard MIDI controller for the purposes of this episode. Okay, so here we have one routing here, and when you hover over it with the mouse cursor, you actually see the letters appear, and you see OFA. That means oscillator, filter, and amplifier. Basically, there's 2 rows, and they're symbolic of the 2 rows that we have here. Oscillator, filter, amplifier. And in this diagram, you see that basically we just have horizontal lines going from the oscillator to the filter to the amplifier. And then after that, it all goes to the LFO section and the master output section that I've already showed you. That's one routing. That would be considered like a parallel routing to oscillators going to their own filters, each one going to a separate filter and a separate amplifier section, and then going out. And then in this routing, you see a little vertical line between the 2 oscillators. What that means is those 2 oscillators basically share with one another. I'm going to click it, and you'll see over here, oscillator 1, F1/F2, 50/50. That means oscillator 1 is 50% of the signal is going to filter 1, 50% of the signal is going to filter 2. And then oscillator 2, you see it's 50-50 as well. So 50% of the signal is going to filter 2, 50% is going to filter 1. You can click on these and change the amounts. Let's say you wanted to go 40-60. Just click on it, type 40. It'll fill in the 60 for you. And likewise up here, if we wanted to make this 60-40, type in 60, and it'll fill in the 40 for you. It'll give you the remaining amount, the remaining percentage amount going to the other filter. And so you think filter 1, filter 2. In this case, we have 40% of oscillator 2 going to filter 1, and 60% of oscillator 1 going to filter 1, and vice versa for filter 2. Alrighty, so let me click back on our routing so we can go through them. We can explore these different routings and the sounds you can make with that later, especially in the next episode. We could look at that. Right now, I'm trying to just kind of like show the lay of the land, because it, unless you read the manual, it could be a little confusing, or like I do, you just spend a little time with it and poke around and figure things out. Here we go. Here's another routing, and I'm clicking it. Hovering over it displays it, but you got to click it for it to initialize it. And as you see, you can change some of these settings on the fly. This is just giving you a quick way of setting up a routing that you want, and then you can adjust later like I did. But here we have the two oscillators joining together, going to the filter 1 and out amplifier 1. So basically this oscillator and this oscillator are putting their full signal into this filter that then goes to this amplifier, and then the rest of the output section. Alrighty, and then finally there's a routing here where got to keep hovering over it. The two oscillators are going into filter 1, and then you see filter 1 is going down into filter 2, and then it's going out amplifier 2. So that means oscillator 1 and 2 go into this filter, and then that filtered signal goes into this filter, and then that goes into this amplifier, and then out. So you see that there's a number of different routings here, and you can customize them like I did. But basically, like, you can turn sections on and off by clicking their names. Orange means on, and you can say what filter they're going to and in what amount here. Like filter 1, if I click on this and drag down, it'll go down through percentages. If I drag all the way down, it goes to filter 2. So it's like filter 1's at the top, filter 2's at the bottom, so you drag in those directions. So let's put that back to going to filter 1. So you can customize those routings the way that you want. Also, each oscillator has a level that you can set, where basically you're advised not to go above 0.0 dB. That's full strength, full signal. You just attenuate if you want to mix them together. If you want oscillator 2 to be a little bit quieter, you would put in maybe like -6 dB, -12 dB, until you get the balance that you're looking for, the mix that you're looking for. Okay, you do have a noise generator here. We could play with that in a little bit. That's separate from the oscillators, and it basically gets routed right here. Once again, filter 1, filter 2. It's off right now. You can turn it on like that, but basically you can assign noise to go into filter 1 or 2, or different percentages of one or the other, like we've been seeing. And it has a color thing here where you can kind of like, since I'm talking about, might as well play it. Turn it on here, going through filter 1. I have the frequency of the low pass all the way up, so we're not really hearing filter 1, but signals passing through it. So there we go. Nice soothing sound. And the color is like the emphasis on what frequency area. Higher frequencies, lower frequencies. but if you go a little too low there, it's really hard to hear. And the headphones I'm using would carry sub-audio frequencies. It seems to attenuate those a little bit. So anyway, you can play with it, listen to it, and see what you think. Yeah, very useful to be able to add noise into sound. So it is a powerful little synthesizer here. And then, you know, that's what I was talking about, is like customizing your own options. So we could just have one oscillator on now. It's a sawtooth. It's going to filter 1, low pass filter. And the 24 means a 24 dB low pass filter, which means you will get kind of like an extreme slope in the cutoff frequency area, at least compared to like a 12 dB low pass filter. And it just has 24 and 12. But in bandpass, it does have a 6 dB, less attenuation. We haven't really gone through bandpassing. We've mostly been using low passing so far. But I think that will be another episode where I'll go through all the different filter types. And that will be good to be able to hear them all and so forth. So that will be in an upcoming episode. For right now, let's go with our comfortable friend low pass 24. And here it's saying to filter 2. So we are going to filter 2 here at this point because of that last routing I selected where filter 1 was going to filter 2. There we go. So we've cut off some of the higher frequencies. You heard it probably dull there a little bit. And then at that cutoff frequency, I can add some resonance. And since we're going through these different sections now, I'm actually going to change this. I'm going to turn off filter 2. We can explore the double filtering and what sounds you can make with that at another time. So I'm going to say 0% to filter 2. What? Oh, that's because of the routing I selected. I got to turn off amp 2, turn on amp 1. So now I'm just going straight across oscillator 1, frequency filter 1, and amplifier 1. And basically, I'm basically overriding these 4 options here. I'm kind of like using this top one here, but basically straight from oscillator to filter to amplifier, but I have the lower levels turned off. Okay, so you can kind of customize your routings pretty easily there. All right, and then in our amplifier section, we do have pan control and level control before going here. So let's look at these in a little more detail. I'm going to go here to oscillator 1. This is basically a frequency adjustment where basically I can have it scoop up in frequency, for example. And this will be how quick it is. And over here, you can get more detailed with it. This is the pitch. It says basically envelope initial value. And it's saying here, like it's negative 97% below the actual pitch you're playing is where it starts. I could zero it out, and then we're back to normal. And then time is expressed in percentage. But I found that using the slider is good enough, but I guess this is percentage of the overall amplitude envelope. And you'll be able to kind of like, visualize that when we get to the amplitude envelope. We've covered amplitude envelopes as a concept before, so if you've been following along in this series, I think you know what I mean. It basically is the portion of the envelope in which this takes place. But then we also have, and basically that's it. It's a beginning of the sound. Let's see here. And then some things that we'll get back to when we get to the LFO section. You can have LFO1 affecting your pitch. It's kind of interesting because the synth overall has another way of doing that, because an LFO on the pitch is basically like vibrato, and it has its own vibrato in the master section here. So, but I guess this would be something where you could create like a vibrato on just this oscillator and not on both. And so that's why you would use that. But also here, key, you see, is at 100%. That means 100% key control over the note that you're playing. If you put that at 0, I'm playing all sorts of notes on all over the keyboard and it's sounding the same. So if you wanted something that you figured without, you know, with one defined pitch, like maybe a percussion sound, you could make that with this and so forth. And then what you would need to do then is set your frequency up here. And so forth. Yeah, but I'm going to zero that out and put you back to 100%. But yeah, I mean, you can use this to, you know, maybe blend noise with a low tone and make like a kick drum sound just with the noise, and maybe add the extra oscillator here. It's well attenuated to kind of color the sound a little bit. Additive synthesis stuff. It's pretty cool. There we are. We're back. And then we have pulse width. It's grayed out because I am on a sawtooth, and you need to be on a square in order to be part of the pulse width family or pulse wave family. And then you can get the tonal changes that pulse width has, and you could have that modulate with your LFO. And then sub sync. Yeah, I haven't played with this too much mode, but basically, yeah, actually, this is something I want to come up, talk about when we're actually making sounds in the next episode, and so forth. So we will get to it, just not in this one. All right, there we go. So we got a square wave going on. And of course, down here, you click on this. Now we're talking about the bottom oscillator. So when you click on one or the other, just note that this view screen, even though it may not look like it's changed, it is now regarding this oscillator, not this one. Let's add it. And so we can do some tunings here. Let's do another square wave. And then we'll do some chorusing by slightly detuning them from one another. Let me type in a 0.5 here. How about that? Oh, that's actually pretty far. Farther than I wanted to go. 0.05. There we go. And down here, I'm going to subtract this by the same amount, so we get a perceived center pitch of the actual frequency that we're playing. Nice vintage square wave chorused sound. All right, and of course you can do two things by octaves and so forth. I think I'm going to stick with what I have right now, but just to show you. And of course, you have semitones over here where you can say, for example, put this up a perfect fourth by going up 5 semitones. There we go. I'm going to put it back to normal. We'll just have them slightly chorused for now. Now let's go to the filter section here. There are two, but right now we have both of these oscillators going into filter 1. Just to double check, yep. And so they're going to be filtered together. And have been all this time, actually. There we go. I'm liking that. So now to go deeper in the filter section, we do have an envelope over it. And so this envelope is governing our filter over time. I'm going to extend the takt time, and what you're going to hear is a rise in the cutoff frequency. Up here you have the option of having these portions being exponential curves or linear. I prefer linear. So basically, this is being controlled by this, and it'll rise. I think actually the percentage amount that you set here, or not percentage, the frequency amount that you set here is what it eventually gets to at the sustain portion of the envelope. It rises to a peak above and then down to that. I believe, let's look at this here, attack. And here's the attack time. You see it's like 15 seconds. Interestingly enough, yeah, you can type into these just like with operator. But with operator, it seemed to like you to type into millisecond values. Here, like if I type in 500, it's giving me 15 seconds, which is the maximum amount of seconds, I believe, that you can have at any portion of these on the envelope. Now, if I type in 0.5, it gives me 500 milliseconds. So basically, it wants you to type it in seconds. And then it'll express it in either milliseconds or seconds based on how large the value is. If it's over a second, it'll put in seconds. But you type it in using seconds. So anyway, so now this is a quicker attack. There we go. And our amplitude envelope is still the same. It's quicker than this, I'm sure, from the default setting, probably 5 milliseconds. And then this is just a rise in the cutoff frequency, but it's probably starting below the fundamental. So no, it isn't. No, it isn't. I'm hearing the fundamental there right at the beginning. So there we go. So it rises above the fundamental up to a peak, and then it settles down. You hear a little, it kind of pulls down a little bit to this point for the sustain. I'll make the decay portion a little bit longer so you can hear that. 0.5 seconds, please. Yeah, you kind of hear it kind of going up and then coming down. Alrighty, and then your sustain. No, your sustain portion of the envelope is here. This is basically level in comparison to your peak level. And I'm just like looking here. It's not, yeah. Yeah, I do not see setting a peak level. So maybe the peak level, let's see here. Let's answer this question once and for all. So this is the peak level. So what you set with this knob, I stand corrected, is the peak level. And then it backs off from that peak level by the amount that you set here. Like 50% basically. When it goes down to the sustain portion of the envelope. Now, sustain holds with you unless you set otherwise. And that's what's really useful for like the looping over here. You can actually loop the envelope. You can set a sustained time. This infinite seconds means that it'll last as long, the sustained portion will last as long as you're holding the key. But you can set a time for it. Let me try 0.5. So once again, I'm not talking about amplitude envelope. The note will hold out. It's just the envelope here is what's stopping. And so our release time is being executed after 500 milliseconds. And this is what we're arriving to. So we're pretty much starting and arriving to the same cutoff frequency setting. It rises up and then back down. Okay, so pretty cool stuff that you can control that. I'm going to set this back to drag all the way down, I believe. Or let me type in 0. And when I type in 0, it gives me 100 milliseconds. Let me type in something like 500. Yeah, and it goes, now it's going to 500 seconds. I want to get, yeah, just drag up and go all the way up, and it gets you to the infinite seconds. Okay, and then you have a loop function for this. You might need to be hearing this on headphones to kind of hear the delicacy there, or good speakers. If it's a built-in speaker on the cell phone, you may not be hearing it, but I am clearly hearing the rise and fall of cutoff frequency there, looping over and over. And if you set these time values right, you can pretty much time it as to how quickly it happens. Let me put the sustained time to 0.5 again. You know, basically you can work with that as you will. There's different shapes though here, and these all, you know, A is attack, D is decay, and then R is release. So this would give you an ADR, attack, decay, release, and then upon repetitions, a release. I mean, after you release the key, it'll give you another release. It's interesting when you try these different things out. But I'm going to be putting other things in the sound, so I don't want too much coloring the sound and hiding some of the other things I do. And then a lot of these filter settings can then also be affected by LFO1 when we get to the LFO section. Right now it's grayed out because LFO1's turned off, but you could basically have this cutoff frequency being modulated by your LFO. And your key control, like whatever key you press. Interesting thing about this, it has a range up to 4, 0 to 4. When I'm at 4, it's considered at full strength. I'm going to play a low key on the keyboard. Now a high key. Basically, you heard how that was like instantaneously high frequency stuff on the high key. Here, we'll do something in the middle. Like you hear the sweep on this lower note, and it's already there on the upper note. So this is affecting, you know, the frequency change here based on the highness and lowness of the key that you're pressing. And this is envelope amount. Once again, it's a range of 0 to 4. So 4 means this envelope is completely controlling the cutoff frequency. We could turn this off by typing 0 here. And so we can set a stable cutoff frequency there that doesn't change. Alrighty, so over here, this is the same type of things, but it's affecting resonance, how much your resonance sticks out. And that can be done with the LFO. That can also be done with your keys. Let's put this at 4 again. I'm going to play a low key and go up. Oh yeah. And yeah, glad I didn't play a real high key. That resonance really started poking out there. Okay, and then of course how much the envelope affects the resonance. Put that on 4. So now the cutoff frequency isn't changing, just the resonance, how much that cutoff frequency area sticks out. That is changing over time in this shape. Alrighty, so pretty cool stuff. A lot of controls. A lot of thought went into making this. Now we go to our amplitude section. And what we have here is, once again, another envelope. Now this has to do with just the amplitude of the overall sound. So we could have a slower attack. I went to linear because I prefer that over exponential. Now you got to be careful when you're setting this amplitude envelope. Remember, this is how quickly the sound comes in, rises to a peak, and then settles into a sustain level, and then how quickly it releases. Any other envelopes you're using, like with your filter, need to fit within that time frame, that overall time frame. Otherwise, you could cut off parts of that other envelope, because this one is basically bringing in and taking out the sound. So your amplitude envelope basically needs to have other envelopes fitting within its time frame. But other things about your amplitude and panning get affected here. You see how there's a pan knob and a level knob. This is so that, like, if you have different signals and you're using 2 different amplifiers with different signal paths going to either or, you could have one thing panned differently than the other. You know, you could have a sine tone and a sawtooth and have them panned left and right, or all the degrees in between as well. So that's pretty cool. You have modulation of your level and modulation of your pan according to the same parameters that we covered in the previous section, basically like your LFO when you turn it on, and we'll be doing that shortly. Your key, and I believe once again it's probably 4. So if I play a low note, it's panned all the way left because I'm in the pan section here. If you're listening to this on a built-in speaker on a laptop or a cell phone, you may not hear the panning so well if the speakers are right next to one another. And there, a high note is all the way to the right. So, yeah, and then there's key. Yeah, that's what I just covered, excuse me. I'm going to zero that out because that is not desirable. There we go. And then, you know, envelope amount. I mean, I would, that would mean this envelope would affect your panning. Try that. It came in from the right and panned to kind of center-ish and things like that. If you work with your shape, I mean, you can, maybe have some cool stuff for that, especially since you can employ 2 different amplifiers, you know, and have different signals move spatially through the panning control. And then, of course, level. And our envelope is at 100%. Otherwise, this wouldn't be happening. Our sound would just be on. Let's just check. Oh, it's not even letting me mess with that. I think there's something in the global section that's probably set that I can't change that, meaning the section that you get from here. Let's see, and then key level. So basically, if I turn this up all the way to 4, low notes, quiet. Now, high notes. Yeah, I didn't want to hit it too hard because I don't want to blast ears. Oh, it goes up to a maximum of 1. Sometimes these value ranges go 0 to 1, sometimes 0 to 4. Interesting. But yeah, you can work it out. Just explore the ranges. All right, now we go here to the LFO. So we can assign these. LFO in hertz, or you can control it in rhythmic speed based on your clock. That's this symbol here. When you click that, your rate dial now has increments of beats. 32nd note, 16th, half, where of course was in there. And let's see, 2D. Oh. Yeah, okay. So that's going beyond measures and so forth. I'll keep it in hertz for now. And now assigning this where it's going to go is done through these sections. Like my filter, since I turned the envelope off, I can now have it completely controlled by the LFO right here. Let's say 4. I believe that's the full amount here. Yep. And it's sweeping all the way down, cutting off the fundamental there. So it's grabbing the whole thing. So maybe about 2. 1. Yeah, 0.5. And of course you could control your amplitude as well as the frequency of your oscillator by clicking on either of those sections and going to the LFO amount that I already pointed out in those sections. So now we have our LFO on our this oscillator. No, it's on the overall filter. Since both of these oscillators are going through this filter, both waveforms are basically having their filtering being shaped by a sine wave at this rate that we set here. And when you click on the LFO section, you can change the wave shape. This is basically a square wave, and here you can change the width of the trough versus the crest. Yeah, I'm just going to leave this at 50. So it's basically like an on-off type of thing. That's what square waves will give you. Although it calls it rectangle there. Interesting. Could say pulse. And then we have noise, which is kind of like a variation. But in this case, the noise I hear slight changes there. Slowly. I've worked with this before, and I've heard more rapid changes. I guess we could turn up the rate. Those differences might be hard to hear on like a small speaker if you're listening on cell phone speaker. I recommend headphones for this series or good speakers spaced apart, especially when we're doing stereo stuff. Noise 2 is like a smooth transition between seemingly randomized values. Yeah, I can hear the cutoff frequency changing there. Of course, we'd hear it more if I turn this back up to something like 4 again. Then sometimes it cuts out the fundamentals, so let me put it on 2. Pretty interesting stuff. Another thing, since we have square waves here, we can select on one of the oscillators, and we could do it to both, and have the that would be pitch modulation to be like a vibrato, but it would only apply to this oscillator. Here's pulse width. We could have LFO 1 altering our pulse width. Let's do it at a level 4 and see what happens. Oh, here the range is 0 to 1. I'm hearing the other stuff, not so much. Yeah, not so much this. Maybe if I do it to both oscillators. The one oscillator could be covering up a bit. Oh, but this one demands to be sent stuff from LFO 2. And so we got to select LFO 2, turn it on, and make the rates about the same. Could type it in, like this is 3.7, right? Yeah. 3.7. We go back to here. And now our LFO2 is on, and we are capable of... Yeah, I can hear it. The pulse width of both oscillators is changing. Maybe let's set this to 0.5 as well as this one. 0.5. But LFO2, we don't have it randomized like we have this one. Well, I'm saying randomized, but basically it's just a smooth noise transition from seemingly random values to other seemingly random values. It may look like a sine wave here, but it's not really. It's just the display. Pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, so yeah, you can do a lot of things here. You're only limited by your imagination. So we covered the LFO section, and then over here we finally have, basically the master output with the overall level of the whole sound, expresses volume. You can also turn on vibrato. It basically saves you from having to send an LFO or two LFOs to the two oscillators at the same rate and everything like that. You can just basically get your frequency modulation vibrato style. And there's also an interesting thing, unison. It's kind of like, here, when I click on unison, this whole area, the master section comes up here where you have some different settings that affect the overall sound. And unison is here. Unison voices, you have an option of 2 or 4. And it's basically like a doubling of the sound. And you detune them here, so it's kind of like a quick chorusing. But I already set chorusing in the sound, so I'm going to turn that off. Just showing you what it is. And then finally, at the end here, we have a glide time. Turn that on. You hear it kind of scooping up in pitch. Similar as to whether you would set that in the oscillator section where we had that pitch shape that you could make there for like scooping up or sliding down in pitch. Here, you don't have to do it in the oscillator section. You can do it to the overall sound. With the wobbling of the sound, it's kind of not as easy to hear. But in this section, where was it, over here somewhere, for glide, there's a mode that you can select here as well. Coast or it's coast or prop. Or is that plop? No, that's prop. There we could hear it. It actually comes through more clear if you take your voices also in the same master section, set it to monophonic. Maybe this is too slow. And I'm going to try coast. There we go. Yeah, I have so much wobbling going around in the sound, it's harder to hear, but it's there. I heard the glide come through quite clear a couple of times there. Just got to get the timing of it right, and when you're setting it, maybe having a more stable tone when you're setting it, and then go on to the other sound design stuff, you can hear it better. All right, folks, I think I did a pretty thorough overview of the GUI. There may be a couple things here and there I didn't quite cover, but we could probably get through those when we start making sounds in the next episode and actually exploring some of the, shall we say, historic or vintage or well-known, synthesizer sound types and how we can make them with this. And now that we have operator and this under our belts, we can explore a lot of sound making because these are pretty powerful instruments. So anyway, if you found this useful at all, please hit that like button. Also, leave a comment if you have questions. I encourage comments. Anything constructive that helps people learn would be quite valid, or just saying hello is nice to hear now and then. Thank you, Mati, for doing that. Those kind of comments help me continue to be motivated to make these episodes. So thank you for joining me. Until next time, take care and stay free.